So, what do people on the pro-democracy side, which is broad, including Democrats and, pro bono legal groups and other organizations and, progressive media, independent media, what are the steps that we need to take now to fight back? And what are the proactive steps that we need to take? Because as you pointed out, there is a perverse creativity to some of these tactics from
Yeah,
the Trump administration. And it seems to me that the pro-democracy movement needs to get creative as well.
they do. It is. There does need to be some creativity, or at least a willingness to imagine,
Mm.
and have imagination. And one of I think back to some of the early conversations we were having when the investigation first came to us when we were sort of seeking out initial legal help, and it was some of the first places firms we spoke to that they took a very traditional approach, even though they were pro-democracy, they were not like ideologically driven, but they were like, well, that would never happen. That could never happen. It's like, no, it can happen. It will happen. And that's why we have to anticipate. So one was understanding what their main objective was, which wasn't just to run a typical investigation, but to try to use it as a way to move or deploy some of these novel theories and sort of make them more cemented and more real. I mean, that's what I mean about imagination. There's a little bit of anticipation at that level. And then similarly, it gets to the proactive part. Every success that we've had has been proactive, not reactive, meaning we did not take a traditional, we will defend ourselves in court when they proceed. We initiated an action on our terms, and that meant that we had the ability to be more successful, and more importantly, to create precedent that would allow others to be successful. So, for instance, all this FTC work that's happened just a few days after we were successful, Judge Boasberg in DC used our new precedent that we just got created to shut down the FTC's investigations into all those trans organizations and trans medical providers. And that's where the cascade comes in. It's that when you are a little bit novel, if you're building new countermeasures, they have a multiplier and a network effect. So that's the second thing. One is to be a little bit more imaginative. The second is to, where there's opportunity, even if most of what we're dealing with is brand new, which means that the responses are going to have to be brand new. They're not going to be the conventional type, wait until you get an enforcement action and then fight it out in the court that they choose. No, you have to go first. Especially when it's clearly retaliatory. You have to really fight to exercise your rights and recognize that it's a novel case. And then the other piece I would just say is, just like for institutions, is culturally is to be girded, to be prepared for this. And I think we were fortunate in some ways and unfortunate others, but because we had already been dealing with that for 2 years, we had a lot of antibodies in our system. And so we were able to deal with and continue to do the work that we do while also dealing with this investigation and these attacks and just the pressure of that. That is not the case for a lot of groups. For many places now, this will be the first time they're dealing with that type of attack, and then you may necessarily turtle or go into a bunker space, and that is understandable, but the ultimate desire that they want anyway. And so if you self-impose that, you're giving them a victory even if you win in court. So there's a preparation part of that psychologically. On the nuts and bolts front, there's a genuine thing that I think I would just say, especially on the pro-democracy piece, we shouldn't underestimate how much they talk about their plans and intentions publicly in their shows, podcasts. They didn't just write Project 2025. Yeah, I mean, they go on. They talk about it almost so much of our record in our first litigation, in all of them, has actually been from podcasts where the people, where the targets were going on. They were talking about their intentions to either target Media Matters or groups like ours, and what they planned to do if they ever got back into power. And so I think groups should be mindful of that as well, is that it is actually an important part of the picture, not just strategically to think about and anticipate where it's going, but also it's really good information for your lawsuits and for your law.
I mean, that's just right in your wheelhouse, right? Because all you do is monitor right-wing media.
Yeah. We did Media Matters them a bit, and it was, when it all first started, finding examples of them talking in a way that was so clearly reinforced our argument that these were designed to be retaliatory was very powerful. I mean, that every judge that has given us, because we've gone through this now multiple times, has found that these were retaliatory, and had in large part cited examples that we found from their own comments on these shows or podcasts or or similar appearances over the years. And so I think we shouldn't underestimate that their playbook is out there. They're very open about it, and that should be something we anticipate. We should believe them when they say it. And the last thing I'll just say is, there's a feeling or a perception, and that's one of the advantages. Like, once these investigations start, it's scary, and you want to cut off ties. People tend to let people go. They disconnect, or that is fundamentally what they're hoping for, especially in the pro-democracy space, is that they're able to sever the connective tissue of civil society and civil institutions. And it really should be the opposite. My biggest lesson from all of this is that, when places are targeted, if they get bigger and stronger as a result of it, it will undermine the tactic fundamentally. Mm-hmm. But if everybody gets weaker a little bit each time, even if they're successful, it just shows them that their strategy is effective, even if it just means it'll be slower. And we just all have to think about that. And I think the pro-democracy space hasn't caught up there either. We talked about perverse incentive structures for sort of these big players and these corporations. There's not an equivalent incentive structure in the pro-democracy space to say, when you are unfairly targeted, not that you will be rewarded, but that you will not end up worse off than when you started. You will be better off. And that's the most effective thing that can be done, because we're dealing with the shadow of the law here and incentive structures. And there has to be some equivalent incentive structure on the side of the pro-democracy forces. And that truly hasn't emerged yet.